this utterly enormous mind map of Elden Ring's lore, and
Gee. Berserk and Claymore are like my two most favorite manga of all time, and I just love dark fantasy. I don't really know why I never got into Dark Souls or like Elden Ring lore until now, but I guess I just never had the time to. I love learning about lore, and I'm super excited to finally learn a bit more about this universe that I've been so interested in.
our story doesn't begin in the lands between. It begins in the cosmos, far away, with an outer god called the Greater Will.
Do the lands between refer to the map that you play Elden Ring on? Like, I barely know anything about the game. I just know some of the bosses and some of the music, which really stands out to me.
There are a lot of outer gods mentioned in Elden Ring. You can think of these kind of like the great ones of Bloodborne. They're distant beings. They're all
I know a bit about
powerful
Bloodborne.
and they're quite unknowable by design.
Lore dive on that as well.
But many of these outer gods want to make their presence felt in the world. The Greater Will, maybe most of all. To this end, it sent a golden star hurtling towards the lands between. The Elden Star's incantation tells us that this golden star was bearing a beast, an Elden beast. The Elden Remembrance calls it a vassal beast of
like
the
the thing
Greater
you fight
Will.
at the end of the game.
If you didn't know, a vassal is someone who holds land on behalf of their overlord. Obviously, this is fitting in this case, because the Elden Beast occupied the lands between on behalf of the Greater Will, and was a living incarnation of the concept of order. As such, this beast would later become the Elden Ring. The Elden Ring itself is made up of runes of power, some great, some small, that together represent a sort of logic for the world to follow. Thus, the Elden Ring represents order. The true nature of this order is a subject of constant debate and research undergone by fundamentalists. But two of the key fundamentals are the laws of causality and regression. You can think of the law of causality as cause and effect, where actions have consequences, and those consequences are new causes that branch out into infinity. These are the relationships.
Oh, kind of like the branches of a tree. Yeah, this B-roll makes a lot of sense now.
Between things. Then there's the law of regression that states that all things eternally yearn to converge and return to their roots. Fittingly, then, the Elden Ring is housed within the Erd Tree, which
there it
towers
is.
over the lands between. But it's very important to stress that life in the lands between did not begin with the Erd Tree, the Elden Ring, or the Elden Beast. No, the lands between were occupied well before the Greater Will came. There were other beings here. There were other factions here. There were other gods here. And there was even another great tree here before the Erd Tree. And this is where
what was that tree about?
A huge twist regarding the Erd Tree comes in. So, there are incantations in the game called Aspects of the Crucible. According to their descriptions, these are manifestations of the Erd Tree's primal vital energies. And I quote,
so you can
they
spot a
are
tentacle?
an aspect of the primordial crucible where all life was once blended together. But how could all life be blended together in the Erd Tree if the Erd Tree appeared after life existed? Well, there can only be one answer, right? That the Erd Tree is a parasite, and it took over a tree that existed here before.
Is that why the Elden Beast also kind of looks like a parasite itself? That is kind of what it's always reminded me of, kind of like some sort of ringworm or tapeworm.
This ancient tree was called the Great Tree. So the Great Tree was almost certainly the location of this primordial crucible, and it must have been a very powerful primordial force for the Greater Will to have commandeered. It might even be the reason the lands between is important to the Greater Will in the first place. It also explains why spells and enemies related to the Great Tree's crucible would eventually be looked down upon. For example, the knot talisman is fashioned from a knotted vestige of the crucible, and it was considered a signifier of the divine in ancient times, but is now increasingly disdained as an impurity as civilization has advanced. Enemies related to the crucible are the Omen, the Misbegotten, and the Crucible Knights, and all three of them would be shunned, enslaved, or imprisoned. Those who speak for the Erd Tree don't want you to know its roots, so to speak.
I guess maybe you could draw this as a parallel to, like, real-world religion. where like a lot of the old pagan religions were kind of demonized because the new thing came in. I'm not exactly an expert on that subject, so I'll just leave it there. But that's what I thought of first.
According to the spell, protection of the Erd Tree, in the beginning everything was in opposition to the Erd Tree, but through countless victories in war, it became the embodiment of order.
Dang.
America's own
Suppressed.
words, the Erd Tree governs all. The choice is thine. Become one with the order,
Or die.
divest thyself of it. To wallow at the fringes, a powerless upstart.
But the Greater Will needed more than a big tree. It needed loyal agents in the lands between. To this
I
end,
saw that
it
text.
has the two fingers, who are
Oh, that's what these are. Okay, we watched Maxwell's video on Elden Ring, and I was like, these are actually two fingers? They're just there? I guess they are. They are two fingers.
its envoys. The two fingers heirloom has a weird picture of them, but it reads, "Of course, fingers cannot speak, yet these are eloquent. Persistently they wriggle, spelling out mysteries in the air. Thus did we gain the words of our faith." These words are interpreted by the finger readers. These are the undying old crones that you would have found throughout the lands between. They pass down the wisdom of the two fingers, or at least they used to.
Your fingers, please, your fingers. I can read them.
Most of them appear to have lost their purpose, and they're desperate to read your fingers and tell you annoying riddles, since their two fingers are likely dead. And yes, of course, there are multiple sets of two fingers. You would have found their corpses on the tops of the divine towers. Atop these towers, you loot the fingers in order to activate the true power of a great rune. Specifically, though, you are giving benediction back to your great rune. You're taking a blessing back from the two dead fingers, essentially. This is just one of many blessings that the two fingers can bestow, and my point is kind of that the two fingers clearly have more than just influence. They have real power on some level. The Greater Will needs these powerful envoys and agents because, while it's obviously incredibly powerful, it does seem limited by a few things. First is space. The Greater Will didn't come to the lands between itself, it sent an Elden Beast to do its bidding instead.
So
second
it can't
is time.
descend,
There is
right?
a moment later in the game where your pair of two fingers goes still because they're forced to commune with the Greater Will for guidance.
When they are finished, the fingers will again offer their guidance. But thousands, if not tens of thousands, of moons must first pass. No matter for me. But you, how will you ever manage to wait?
So the Greater Will needs a physical manifestation of order. It needs envoys to convey its will, but what it also needs is a god. Introducing Marika the Eternal. I have this utterly enormous mind map of Elden Ring's lore, and
Gee. Oh my god. Oh boy. Dude, I feel like the first time I ever saw like a map of the 40k universe. Isn't it just so exciting though that there's so much potential here for you to learn, dive into? I don't know. That could just be me, but salute to Vaati for this. An absolute Giga Chad lore nerd.
there's a reason she's at the center. She's essentially the equivalent of Gwyn from Dark Souls, except unlike Gwyn,
need to learn
Marika
about
didn't
Dark
just
Souls too.
crawl out of the dark and find power. To an extent, it seems like she earned it. We don't know much about her origins, except that she is of the Newman race, which is actually an origin that you can choose in the character selection screen. Newman come from outside the lands between, and are supposed descendants of denizens of another world, long-lived but seldom born. At some point, Marika was chosen as an Empyrean. What is an Empyrean? Well, an Empyrean is
The
a
Imperium of
being
Man?
chosen by the fingers as a candidate for godhood. As an Empyrean,
Oh.
Marika received the aid of a shadow to do her bidding. So what is a shadow? Well, it's a wolf, shadowbound to its Empyrean by the two fingers. Luna Princess Rani is another example of an Empyrean with a shadowbound beast. You would have met live.
Oh.
These
Oh, okay. The dots are connecting here. Yeah, I mean, Maxor's videos do somewhat tell lore, but like the way that it's told is quite abstract, if you will. Regardless, though, with Vaati's explanation here, yeah, I can start to see connections between characters and understand a few more jokes here and there.
Creatures are the Empyrean's very own shadow. They are completely loyal to their needs and, by definition, incapable of treachery. Marika's shadow was a beast called Malakath. Every Empyrean uses their shadow in different ways, but Marika's sole need of her shadow was as a vessel to lock away destined death. So what is destined death? Well, according to Enya, it's the rune of death.
The rune of death goes by 2 names. The other is destined death.
We mentioned earlier that the Elden Ring is made up of runes, and at some point, maybe when she was chosen as a god, Marika plucked the rune of death from the Elden Ring. She gave the rune of death to Malakath, her totally loyal shadow, who bore a black blade imbued with this rune. It's kind of genius, really. In a single act, she removed the concept of death from the lands between, while also commanding total control of death through her shadow, who could deliver it at her whim.
Oh, I mean, is that the reason why when you die, you respawn? Is that like the in-game lore for that? I think there's also a similar lore reason in Dark Souls as well. But you know what? That's pretty badass. Just saying, yeah, no, death, not gonna be a thing here.
Now, some of you might be asking, if death is removed from the lands between, how come I can kill this dog? First off, shame on you. Second, from a lore point of view, that dog isn't really dead. It's simply in the process of its spirit, or its soul, returning to the Erd Tree. Catacomb dungeons, for example, are specifically constructed near the roots of the Great Tree for this reason, so that the Erd Tree can reabsorb their ashes back into it. This process replaced the concept of a death that you were destined to have, but this random spirit outside of a catacomb dungeon says it best. As another example of this theory, when you kill a major boss, you receive a remembrance of them. These are spirits, and they are hewn into the Erd Tree. In this way, thanks to the Erd Tree's grace, their spirits are immortalized, in a sense. This new form of death also explains what's happening when you summon spirits
from ash and return to the Erd Tree.
However, some spirits never return to the Erd Tree, and they rise within death as corpses or skeletons instead.
Maybe I can think of this in a similar way as to, well, for those of you who might be familiar with like 40k lore, like the craft world Eldar, they have this, I guess, jar, if you will, where the souls of the craft world Eldar go to when they die so that they don't, leave and go to the warp and get captured by Slanesh instead. I suppose, I'm thinking of the Erd Tree kind of in a similar way. Like, there is no true death. You are just kind of remembered through the roots of the trees. And at whatever point in the future, you can also be summoned, quote unquote. I don't really know the terminology for all of this.
So this was the new order. And it's important to stress that it was in this moment, when the rune of death was removed, when destined death was taken, this is when order became the Golden Order.
The forbidden shadow plucked from the Golden Order upon its creation.
Specifically, this was Marika's Golden Order. So not only did she become a god and a vessel for the Elden Ring, she became renowned as Marika the Eternal for her removal of destined death. It was a huge part of her character and her reign as well. However, Marika had more than just death to conquer. She had wars to fight, as the world was occupied by many forces that could threaten her Golden Order. There was war with the Storm Lord, who likely ruled over Stormvale, and there was a war with the Giants, who were masters of a flame that could burn the Erd Tree. There was war with the Ancient Dragons, who incidentally had stones that could twist time and thus slay a god. And finally, there was war brewing with the Carrion Royalty, who had previously obeyed laws which contravened the Golden Order. Thus,
Lots of
sort of
laws.
similar to how the Greater
Lots of
Will
wars.
needed an Empyrean to enforce its will, Marika herself needed someone to wage war. So, there was to be a husband, a consort, an Elden Lord. The man chosen was Holo, a ferocious warrior who became known as the Lord of the Battlefield. His crown was warranted with strength, and while it was for this strength that Marika married him, he was also required to take a vow to conduct himself as a lord. To suppress the ceaseless lust for battle that raged within, Holo took the beast regent Sarosh upon his back. You'll notice this is another example of a beast being given for the purpose of serving order. Thus, in this moment, he went from being Holo, warrior, to Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, consort to Queen Marika, and a certified demigod.
I've heard that name before.
Godfrey and Marika had 3 demigod children together. There was Godwyn the Golden, who you saw being killed in the opening trailer, and there were also the reviled Omen twins, Morgoth, who guards the Erd Tree, and Mohg, who became Lord of Blood.
Oh. I'm like, Mohg. Oh, yeah, that guy that Xenog VA voiced in Maxor's video. But yeah, that boss fight looked pretty intense. It's just such a satisfying feeling, like seeing all these things that you know from other stuff just finally being connected. It's like something's connecting in your brain.
You might think that Godric was another demigod child, but he actually wasn't. Instead, he was probably descended from Godwyn. Anyway, we'll talk about the demigods more in detail in another video, so subscribe for that. But for now, just know that Godfrey and his offspring were the first demigods, henceforth known as the Golden Lineage. In his wars, Godfrey led his 16 Crucible Knights into battle, who were named so for they fought with the primordial powers of the Erd Tree. Their incantations were aspects of the Crucible itself, and they likely fought giants, dragons, the Stormlord, and more to usher in their age.
Yeah, we just saw that Crucible Knight use some of the powers that the player character was using earlier on the video, which is, as Vaati explained, kind of like the power of life itself, essentially. Maybe after these fights with the Crucible Knights, then you actually like gain that power to use theirs, which I think is always a cool thing.
The age of the Erd Tree.
In Marika's own words, "Hark, brave warriors. Hark, my lord Godfrey. We commend your deeds. Guidance hath delivered ye through each ordeal to the place ye stand. Put the giants to the sword and confine the flame atop the mount. Let a new epoch begin, an epoch glistening with life. Brandish the Elden Ring for the age of the Erd Tree."
The Erd Tree would go on to be largely seen as a blessing for all of those in the lands between, especially those close to it in Lanedell, the capital
really have a
city
choice?
of the Erd Tree. The tree bestowed blessings. For example, the dew that dropped from its branches were like jewels. It loomed overhead as a constant reminder of order, and its roots reached far and wide, relieving many of the burden of death. In fact, Erd Tree burial was one of the highest honors a hero could receive. One by one, the previous factions of the world fell. The giants were put to the sword, and their fell god was killed by Marika herself. The ancient dragons broke down the walls of Lanedell, but met fierce retaliation. However, I think the House of the Erd Tree encountered the most trouble against the land to their southwest, Leonia. Here, the House of the Moon repelled their offensives time and time again, and I mean that literally, because there was not just one but 2 wars fought here, and in both of these, there was no victory for the Golden nor for the Moon. And I suspect it was probably because of these lobsters. These damn things can snipe you from like a mile.
Okay, I've never played Elden Ring before. We did stream a bit of it here on the channel, but I do know about these lobsters that everyone hates. Like, goddamn, I would totally believe it if these lobsters were the reason why they couldn't actually defeat this kingdom.
Mile away, and it's bullshit. Actually, it was probably because of the Carrier Knights, who, according to their weapons, were able to wield sorcerous battle skills, and despite numbering fewer than 20, this power made them a match for even the champions of gold in battle. These enchanted knights were anointed by the Lunar Queen, a young astrologer who went on to establish the House of Caria as royalty in this land. With her bewitching lunar magic, she won over the Academy of Raya Lucaria, where glintstone sorcery was studied, and united the Carian royal family and the learned scholars of Raya Lucaria defended their home from the golden aggressors. At the head of this great golden army was Radagon.
Here he is, the turtle priest. It was not explained in Maxor's video at all, and I believe he even said that he didn't want it to be explained. There was only horror behind those eyes or something along those lines.
Lord Radagon was a great champion, possessed of flowing red locks. He came to these lands at the head of a great golden host when he met Lady Renala in battle.
These two champions clashed, fell in love, and joined their houses.
Radagon once cleansed himself with celestial dew, repented his territorial aggressions, and swore his love to Renala. The Order of the Erdtree and the fate of the moon were conjoined, and all the wounds of war forgiven.
You might think it strange that the Greater Will would permit this union, but it's not too odd, all things considered. As with most From Software games, sorcery and faith are just two sides of the same coin, and both of these powers stem from the cosmos. Radagon and Renala were known to have 3 children together. Lunar Princess Rani, who inherited her mother's propensity for lunar magic, Radahn, who took after his father Radagon and would go on to master gravitational magic, and Rykard, who pioneered new hex sorceries and would go on to feed himself to a great serpent.
Oh, the great serpent, you say? I think I know what serpent you're talking about. Is it the serpent that you have to, like, use a special weapon to fight against that you get at, like, that's, like, right in front of the pit of hell there? And, other guy, oh god, it's only been a few seconds, I already forgot his name. But yeah, he rides a tiny horse, and I was always super curious about that, so I did, like, read in the comment sections of videos that contained him and stuff like that. It looks like he knows gravity magic, and while he's fighting you, he kind of, like, holds back the stars at the same time, somehow. But, like, he has his own trusty steed, and he doesn't want to, like, you know, put his entire weight on it because it would probably die. So he also, like, uses gravity magic on himself to make sure that he can ride his steed. That's great. I know that fight is tough as balls for the majority of people that I've seen attempt it. But yeah, it's great. Once again, just so many dots connecting, so many lines leading to more places, and just a lot more to be discovered.
It follows that at some point after this, Marika began to harbor doubts about the Golden Order that she had had a hand in creating.
In Marika's own words, I declare mine intent to search the depths of the Golden Order through understanding of the proper way. Our faith, our grace is increased. Those blissful early days of blind belief are long past. My comrades, why must ye falter?
And it's at this point that we should talk about Marika's motivations, her character. This is surely going to be one of those huge points of debate in the coming years, but for now, my working theory is that she wanted to discover the truth behind order and the truth behind the greater will, and she believed that bonds had to be broken so that they could be better understood. She believed that there was great meaning to be found in hardship.
Queen Marika has high hopes for us, that we continue to struggle unto eternity.
For Lord Godfrey, his struggle ended at the end of his campaigns. According to his armor, he led the war against the giants, faced the Storm Lord alone, and then there came a moment when his last worthy enemy fell, and it was then, as the story is told, that the hue of Lord Godfrey's eyes faded. In truth, he was robbed of his grace. Then Marika sent him away.
My lord, and thy warriors, I divest each of thee of thy grace. With thine eyes dimmed, ye will be driven from the lands between. Ye will wage war in a land afar, where ye will live and die.
This became known as the Long March of the Tarnished, as...
Dang. Tarnished? Isn't the main character always called that? But yeah, it's always sad realization that warriors have to face. I mean, I'm talking about this from the perspective of like other video games too, where a soldier is only useful during times of war. Otherwise, like, what are you there for? Well, for Godfrey, he was literally there to like conquer everything, to make sure that nobody got to the Erd Tree, but once that was done, then nothing was left. Perhaps this may have contributed to, I think her name was Marika, about the doubts that she started having against this greater will that they were following.
Godfrey and his tarnished descendants walked away from the lands between. But Queen Marika absolutely had a plan here, that Lord Godfrey and his descendants would one day return stronger, having struggled outside of grace.
So are we
After
the main character?
thy death, I will give back what I once claimed. Return
His
to the lands
descendants?
between. Wage war. And brandish the Elden Ring. Grow strong in the face of death. Warriors of
think-
my lord, Lord Godfrey.
Soon after, she
I
found
think
a
so.
new husband. Either that or a new husband was found for her.
When Godfrey, first Elden Lord, was hounded from the lands between, Radagon left Rennala to return to the Erd Tree capital, becoming Queen Marika's second husband and king
Radagon.
consort, taking the title of Second Elden Lord. The mystery
Rennala happy with
endures
this?
to this day as to why Lord Radagon would cast Lady Rennala aside, and moreover, why a mere champion would be chosen for the seat of Elden Lord.
Whatever the case, as a part of this union, Radagon's prior 3 children with Rennala became demigod stepchildren, granted grace thanks to their
Demigod
new
stepchildren.
family tree. Rennala was broken by this, and so was her country, Leonia.
Understandably.
Queen Set reads, when Rennala, head of both the Academy of Raya Lucaria and the Carian royal family, lost her husband Radagon, her heart went along with him. And then those at the Academy realized that Rennala was no champion after all. In the wake of Radagon's betrayal and Rennala's poor judgment, Leonia struggled with civil war, with the Academy of Raya Lucaria on one side and the Carian royals on the other. And it's here, during the age of the Erd Tree, that Lunar Princess Rani, daughter of Rennala and Radagon, stole a fragment of the Rune of Death.
It happened during the
Oh?
golden age of the Erd Tree, long before the
Why?
shattering of the Elden Ring. Someone stole a fragment of the Rune of Death from Malekith, the Black Blade.
As mentioned previously, Malekith was Marika's shadow, and he
Yeah.
had sealed destined death in a black blade. Then a fragment, only a fragment, of this Rune of Death was stolen. And once this happened, Malekith went a step further in protecting destined death. He bound the blade within his own flesh, such that none might rob death ever again. It was too late, however. This fragment of the Rune of Death was used immediately, that night, to kill a demigod, Marika's own son, Godwyn the Golden.
That was the first recorded death of a demigod
That's what we see in
all
the-
history.
the very
It became
beginning,
the
right?
catalyst. Soon, the Elden Ring was smashed, and thus sprang forth the war known as the Shattering.
Now, there is a lot of really credible evidence that Marika was behind this plot to have a fragment of the Rune of Death stolen.
Oh?
There's also a ton of evidence that Marika is behind the entirety of your Tarnished quest, but we'll talk about that in another video. For now, all you really need to know, in terms of the timeline at least, is this. After the marriage of Marika and Radagon, and after a fragment of the Rune of Death was stolen, Marika went on to shatter the Elden Ring, and Radagon attempted to repair it, to no avail. The Elden Ring had been broken into runes, some great and some small.
You know, it's said that Lord Radagon harbored a secret. A famed sculptor of the Erd Tree capital was once summoned to render Lord Radagon's likeness in giant stature. when he glimpsed the skeleton in Radagon's closet. And as such, it's said the great statue harbors his secret too.
Of course, the huge twist in Elden Ring is that Radagon is Marika, or depending on what you believe, he became her, for she knew it was going to happen.
In Marika's own words, O Radagon, leal hound of the Golden Order, thou art yet to become me. Thou art yet to become a god. Let us be shattered, both. Mine other self.
You can tell when From Software is keeping something a little bit open-ended, and of everything in Elden Ring's lore, this will also go on to be one of the biggest unknowns as we move forward. For example, the wording, thou art yet to become me, reinforces that Marika and Radagon were two separate entities before the shattering. However, in contrast, there is also evidence that Radagon was always part of Marika. For example, Enya says that
the demigods are each and all the direct offspring of Queen Marika.
But how can this be if Radagon married Renala and had those demigod children? The only way that makes sense is if Radagon was always Marika and he just went over there to seduce Renala long ago.
Oh my god! Imagine being Renala. What the fuck, dude? I got bamboozled. I need to know. What the... Did not expect this twist coming. What is this situation? Is it like, you know, an alter ego, a shadow, a shattered form, or just... What? Some sort of separate entity that was always destined to become as one? Or the same entity split into two, like the opposite side of a coin? I don't know. I know nothing about the lore. All I can do is just speculate, but like, goddamn.
I'll present more concrete theories in the future, but on this matter, the most important thing is, what do you think? While you can figure out a ton of Elden Ring's story, not all of it is open to interpretation. Certain things are, and this is one of them. And your interpretation is a big part of what makes this story special. At any rate, the union of Radagon and Marika seems to be a union of two fundamental opposing laws of the Golden Order. We mentioned these laws earlier, actually. There's the law of causality, and Marika is an agent of cause and effect. And there's the law of regression, as Radagon is a character who aspires to be complete and regress together. So I have a theory that forcing these two beings that represent these concepts together would have corrected Marika's deviance. But even so, she was imprisoned in the Erd Tree for the crime of the shattering.
Marika's trespass demanded a heavy sentence. But even in shackles, she remains a god and the vision's vessel.
The conjoined Radagon and Marika even had two demigod children of their own, Mikola and Millennia. These...
Oh no. Oh god. I was wondering when they were going to get into the story, because we hadn't heard any mention of them just yet. How do you have children with your other self? What is this? Self-cest is Wincest? But then again, it's a From Software game. This is dark fantasy. Like, things can go off the rails real quick, and it already has. I'm sure there's even more here that is left to be explored.
Two children were born afflicted. Mikola was cursed with eternal childhood, and Millennia harbored a horrific rot within. Even so, these two children were both chosen as Empyreans. They were immensely sacred beings and eligible to inherit godhood from the Greater Will. Perhaps the Greater Will was just desperate to find a worthy successor, and indeed in the Shattering War to come, many would try to claim the shards of the Elden Ring, and they would try to take the throne, including, of course, the Tarnished, who returned from their long march at long last.
One of
which
Godfrey's
we'll talk about in
descendants.
the next main lore video. I should probably also mention here that if you become a patron, you'll see upcoming lore videos early, as that's one of the rewards you get if you pledge to the $3 tier. And if you think my channel really adds a lot of value to the Souls games for you, to the point where you pledge $20, then in this new tier, you'll receive a new mug every 3 months that has a unique design on it, to do with the games by From Software. There are 4 to collect. The first one you'll get is inspired by Dark Souls, then Elden Ring, then Sekiro, and finally Bloodborne. And they all have fantastic art that I worked on with an amazing artist named Chu. But anyway, I figured this is the right place to end this video because the information here is going to be overwhelming. I bet it probably was too overwhelming, you know? It took me ages to commit these names
as a newcomer, like, this is mind-blowing
to memory, so I hope you guys are doing all right. One thing that helped me a lot was that we designed an enormous mind map with pretty much all of Elden Ring's lore, all of its item descriptions, all of its dialogues, all of the relationships between characters that we can think of. We added all of this together, and it helped a ton in learning about the story and visualizing it all. And one day I will make this asset available to you all, because I think after doing it, I think this is the quintessential way to piece together the story, and I think giving you guys this asset eventually will make that accessible for people. So I'm really excited about that. I want to thank Absa and Zard for accepting the paid task of helping me put all the raw data into this mind map so that I could better understand everything. I want to thank Paragod for fulfilling all of my footage requests and creating so many cinematic scenes for this video and for you all to enjoy. And I last of all want to thank John Devlin for the incredible thumbnail. And of course, thank you for watching. There are some really exciting things ahead, and I actually believe this might be the best story that From Software have ever put together. I just think not only are there so many amazing item descriptions, but so many of them are impactful. There are so many moments where you piece together the story and have like a eureka moment, and I'm enjoying it so much. But
that's like what I love about games like this, From Software games. Like, just from the little bit that I know of them, that you can piece together an entire story without there being a whole like narrative dump just put on you, just by like, you know, discovering the lore from the items, reading them, seeing the connections between them, or even just through like the designs of certain enemies or the moveset that they use. The world building that they do is pretty insane, and I just really appreciate it because I get super annoyed whenever a game just dumps everything on me. It's almost like they think I'm dumb or something. Like, sometimes, you know, I mean, I can understand that it's not for everyone. Sometimes you just kind of want to play a game and like relax and have it, I guess, tell you what it's about, and, you know, just have some fun with it, right? But it's nice to know that there are games like this still out there, games that really make you want to discover more about its world rather than dumping its entire world onto you.
Now I'm gonna go and play the game a little bit because I've been editing this video for too long. So, see you next time.
No, I bet. This must have taken a lot of work. Like, massive shout out to everybody who worked on this video too. Incredible video by Vaati. I've never checked out any videos from his channel before, and honestly this was an amazing first experience, especially for somebody who's new to the Elden Ring lore. So if you haven't already, check the top of the description. There should be a link to the original video there. As always, give it a like, give it a sub. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll catch you in the next one if I do another one.